Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Zoom Test Kitchen. It's Jeff Widgren, and glad to have you here and be back at things. Last week we weren't here, so glad to be back always. Had a trip down to Texas and back, but back and raring to go. So we meet here every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern and invite you to invite your friends and peers in the industry of live events and Zoom management and so forth. So we review latest release notes. We dig into those features. We don't just talk about them. We usually dig in when they can be exercised, try to identify best use cases. When would we use those features? Not just how, but when as well, so they're practical. But anyways, good to be here. Like I said, welcome. Get Ray here. Hello,
Hey Jeff,
Ray.
how are
Looking
you?
good. Picture's looking great.
Hi.
Coon, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine.
Don Edelson is here.
Greetings and good afternoon for those of you who are in our hemisphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura Thompson's here. Hello, Laura. And we've got
Hello.
Kenneth Pino said he would be in the background for a little bit yet, but we welcome him as well as George as as well. So glad to have you here. Who in this new year who's been doing what? Anybody had some interesting experiences in Zoom with Zoom? Any challenges? Kuhn, you raised your hand. What do you
Yes,
got?
I did some tests with Zoom ISO last week. It ended up with a complete disaster. I wanted to use it for streaming our the meetings of the city council, and I tried to grab 30 siphon clients out of it. What it completely sucked out all resources of my MacBook M1, and it slowed down my Stream Deck, etc., etc. So I needed to disable it. My conclusion at the moment is that it's better to use Zoom ISO on another computer than the one you are streaming with. But I'm curious about your findings about it. Thank you.
So how many in this meeting today have used by quick just raise of hand visually Zoom ISO? We've got got a few. I guess I'd say the first thing that that hit me was did you say you were pulling 30, trying to pull 30
Yes,
images
30
out of there?
with 180 pixels, so very small.
Oh, I got you.
I wanted to sort out the gallery view by party. I have 9 parties in the city council, so I wanted to sort them out per party there in the council. Well, it didn't work.
I'm pretty sure that Zoom limits you. There's a data rate. I know that if you try to push more than 4 in HD, I can't remember what the cap is. Like they somehow track that bandwidth per instance. So if you're trying to run Zoom ISO on, you might need to run 2 instances to break it apart. Once you get to a certain limit, it caps you. And I believe it's by data rate. Yes, it might be by pulls of people, but I'm pretty sure it's data rate.
Yes, you're right. But as far as I know, it's that only occurs with HD quality, so 720 or 1080. I've been told that when you get 330 or 180, you can grab as many sources
unlimited.
as you want. But
I mean, we could try. I don't know how many people have in today.
The
I have it
limit
running.
being the resources in your machine, right? So you said you were on a Mac M1. Do you know about how many you got before that Mac M1 started suffering?
Well, it didn't work at all. I got black screens, and later on it completely took all the resources of my CPU, so it was running at about 400%. Well, that shouldn't be a problem because the M1 has got 8 cores, as far as I know. But it didn't function, and it did call, for instance,
Is it the 8 gig cone? Is it the
break in
8?
the yes.
Is it the 8 gigabyte RAM version or the 16 Mac Mini?
Gigabyte RAM. Yes.
Yeah,
I have the same machine,
you're breaking up a bit, Koen.
and then also, is it NDI 5 version or is it the?
No, I used Siphon.
Oh,
I
you
used it on
Siphon.
the same computer as I was streaming with.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd do that. I'd probably bust it apart. So the way I use mine is I have vMix on another machine or Wirecast, and then I pull my NDI 5 feeds into that. And I can try that and let you know. Like, I'll bring one into this meeting right now. Just as we're moving through, I'll mute and go over and pull it and see what happens. But I've done 4 1080p's, no problem. And we do it in office hours every morning, and that's but beyond 4, yeah, that
or
we
over
have separate
NDI.
machines.
Separate
Those are
machines.
Siphon. Those 4 and 1080p are for office hours or Siphon using Blackmagic cards, but they busted up into 5 machines actually to pull the feeds. But again, that's HD. You're talking about just using like the Gallery 320. But I can try and do NDI. Is NDI something you'd be into using?
No, yes, well, I could try that, but I was testing Siphon because it's told to me that NDI has a bigger latency than Siphon does. But
Oh, well, maybe. I mean, we're talking like,
okay.
yeah, it'd be milliseconds. I mean, NDI is fast. Yeah, I mean, the pull, you can't, it's like imperceptible. It's so fast.
But your advice would be to use another machine or use it on the same machine?
That's how I mean, you just don't want to load down. You know, the M1's pretty quick, but trying to make it pull, spit out, plus encode, plus if are you bringing it into OBS or some other, how
OBS,
are you?
OBS, yes.
Yeah, and then OBS on a Mac is not good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I've done things, I've isolated the my Zoom meeting and my streaming from the ingest machine, and like never the twain shall meet. Because then at least if the ingest gets clogged, I still have a meeting going on.
Yeah.
Was the Zoom ISO client, was that also acting as the host of the meeting?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that machine had a lot going on for sure. But yeah, and it's good to hear about the experience because I don't think anybody would have, beyond just practicing out of caution, to break up the workloads, but to now hear about.
I think it would be better to use a second machine. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Potentially 3. I mean, I would probably have. I know I would have hosted the Zoom meeting on my primary PC. I would have had ISO running on a secondary machine, and the streaming possibly would be a third system that's dedicated to just capturing and streaming as well. That one, in my case, I often stream out of vMix, which is also my primary Zoom host. But yeah, anytime we can separate those workloads on computer systems, it certainly buys us a whole lot more surety that it will run without interruption. But when you get there and create that separation and give that a test again, or if you wish to test it, in the Zoom test kitchen and share the results and so forth, we're happy to make that a part of it as well.
Yeah,
but we'd love to hear the results either way.
Yes.
So did you have testing before that meeting and you had success, and then you just had a
Yes.
different
Well,
experience when you went live?
I tested it with 4 users, so that's not much. I had no more devices available at that moment, so that went fine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So more of a quantity thing is what
Yes.
got you.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
Well, very good. How about anybody else? We've had others join us. I see Mike. I see Pete. Robert's just joining. Ward. Any other experiences, questions? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I'm about a 1.5 year newbie to vMix. I'm running vMix, having a great time. Learning curve is over. Using vMix calls predominantly as my source of bringing in calls. I have a client that has a pretty sizable job. They want me to bring everybody in via Zoom. I'm in the process now of learning how to use Zoom NDI. I haven't gone to Zoom yet to get the, I guess, do you need a 1080 account in order to use Zoom NDI? Or do I just go to my Zoom account? And I guess I could use some help on my workflow is the following. Everybody comes in via Zoom NDI, and it's a 3-day meeting, total of 8 people per day. So that's 24 total, all coming in Zoom. They're coming in each day. It's a max of 3 people per session. Then a 10-minute break, then another 3 people coming in, 10-minute break, then another 2 people coming in. How would I, big picture thinking here, I'm thinking about using Zoom NDI to bring it into my vMix. I cut on the vMix, slower thirds, graphics, spit it back out to Zoom on the return.
So
any help or advice?
One Zoom meeting, audience and speakers, or more than one? What's on your mind right now?
That's where I need your help. I am new to Zoom. I am green in the Zoom area. I'm a newbie in the Zoom area. How would you break that up? I was talking to Gary Gibson, and he's doing a lot of Zooming, but couldn't get enough detail from him. I'm opening it up to you guys to kind of help me with the workflow. How would you set that up?
Yeah, I'll hand it over to Guy, because he's really familiar with like Zoom NDI starts with Zoom Rooms, right?
My mic. Yeah, I would use Zoom Room NDI, and that way you can get the isolated audio feeds, but you can't push it back into the same meeting. Otherwise, it's going to be too delayed because it's got to come down to you, do its thing in vMix, and then go back out. And so your best bet would be to push it into another webinar, into another meeting, so you get your panelists or the people that are doing the talking, and then push them over. But yeah, Zoom Rooms will automatically give you that bump up to 720p. Beyond that, if you wanted to get 1080, you'd have to put in a request, and getting that request in is somewhere you really most likely need a business account. And getting to 720 is pretty easy. Anyway, you could just submit a request to Zoom, and they'll hand it over to you. Getting to 1080 is a little bit more challenging. But yeah, one Zoom room, once you open it up, you basically just use a controller. In fact, now the controller is online in the web portal. You can just open up a controller that allows you to pin the participants, and it'll say pin to NDI. And so you just go pin. And then in vMix, when you open up NDI, add input, you just grab those. You'll see them all sitting there. And you can also you can also grab gallery and active speaker as well. So you can get actually 5 NDI outputs out of a Zoom room.
And how many Zoom rooms would I need then? Just 2 or 3?
So if you're for every 3 people, you need 1.
Okay, so each Zoom room can only hold 3 people?
Well, it can hold as many as you want, but you only get 3 pins. I mean, you can be in a meeting of 500. 3 NDI
pins.
Yep, 3 NDI pins.
Okay, it's Zoom room, 3 NDI pins. Can you please rewind to the very beginning, Guy? And you're talking about the delay in the audio. So you're
Yeah, coming
suggesting,
to you's no problem. The it's just like here. It's just a regular meeting.
right?
I mean, the only difference is you'll see a little pop-up that just says this meeting's being live streamed on NDI. And as long as you're that's the other important thing. If it's your meeting, no problem. But for others that may be watching, you do need to be a co-host to be able to pull these feeds if it's not your meeting. The Zoom room needs to be a co-host to pull NDI
Okay,
feeds.
what is a co-host? You lost me there completely. So I have a Zoom account. Do I set myself up as a host?
You'll be host automatically if you created the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's your meeting, you just need to make sure that you make the Zoom room a co-host. Otherwise, it won't have the ability.
The Zoom room.
Yeah, it won't have the ability to pin. It'll be grayed out.
And then,
Mike, are you clear on what a Zoom room is, Mike?
Please inform me. I guess it's just a room. Please tell me.
You want to clarify that, Guy?
Go ahead.
So, because the term room and rooms is bounced around in Zoom in a number of places, so it's good to kind of clarify. In this context, Zoom, what we're referring to as a Zoom room is an instance of the Zoom product called Zoom Rooms, which is a software platform. And actually, this is a Zoom room over here. It's software that you install typically on a computer. You can get other devices too, but it takes over that essentially computer. And it's a licensed product. So it's not something you're going to have included in your current subscription necessarily.
Oh, so I need to buy a Zoom room.
Yeah, typically it's a monthly subscription. They're $50 a month each. So if you're that's why I just wanted to catch on this, because if you're going down a road where we're talking about multiple Zoom rooms, now you're into multiple paid instances of the product known as Zoom Rooms, and that comes at a price. It may suit your use case, but just want to be clear. And then although it's a Zoom Rooms, and it then acts as a extended client. You join it to a meeting. You bring in, add in the room. The room joins the meeting, and then you get all this functionality that guys talking about. But to get there, I just want to make sure you had the understanding of what we're talking about.
And then, Guy, you were saying that so all the participants would come to me, but when I send them program return, you're saying that there would be a delay in the audio. So you were saying something like push it to another. I lost you there.
So where do the viewers watch are they in the same meeting? Are the viewers in the same meeting or no?
Well, the viewers, I would be pushing it out to another, I don't know where yet. Either on 24 or another Zoom room or a Zoom.
Yeah, as long as it's going to somewhere else, because I mean, it could be a 30-second delay. I mean, that's what happens with YouTube. When you push it to YouTube, there's a 30-second delay. So as long as it's going somewhere else, it's just that there's like a half second to a second of if there's conversation go. Yeah, so the return back, if you're doing like a 2-up in vMix where you put some pretty graphics like Greg Gibson does, and you fed it back into the meeting, people would get confused because if we ever have to do that, what we do is we send the return back really small so they don't really see their lips moving, because the second that they see their lips moving, they get confused and flustered and they can't handle it. I mean, pros can, but normal people just can't. They can't see themselves delayed a second. It throws them off. So in Guy's scenario,
send program. Oh, go ahead.
They may not even need to see program. In Guy's scenario, your participants, you would just be having a meeting with each other in Zoom. You're then taking those feeds and creating something else, which you're pushing out. The only reason they need to see that, it sounds like, is just maybe confidence at best. And you don't. What is there a use case that they need a return from you from your mix?
Yes, I was going to send them an output of vMix, program output, not the stream. The stream they won't probably see. Well, they can if they want, but program out of vMix, I would take the output and send it to them so that they could see teleprompter, and that they could see all the other participants who are not on air.
Okay, but if they're in the meeting in a Zoom client, they'll have that option anyway because they'll be in a Zoom meeting. They will have the normal.
That's a good point. Right? They'll see everybody.
They're already in the meeting. So if you're dealing with teleprompter and stuff, then you've got to figure out a workflow for that. But as far as they're concerned, they can just be in a meeting talking to each other. And and that's a regular Zoom experience. You're then, taking feeds out and doing something else with it. But,
okay, so I would not, the only thing I would need to send back to them is prompter. And I could send that right out of vMix right back into Zoom, and they would see it, correct?
you could do that, or you could bring
And
that
I've
in.
done that before.
Yeah, or you could bring that in as a separate participant. Just have a separate computer to the side.
Exactly.
In the meeting, right.
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you.
Cool. And Jeff, can you make the DVEPTZ a co-host, just so I can, if I need to pull up an example? Thanks.
And I meant Greg Gibson, not Gary Gibson.
Yeah, we heard that.
We knew he lives right.
Talking about.
He lives right around the corner from me. I ought to just get him to come over here and show me how to do it.
Yeah, he dug into Zoom NDI rooms early, that's for sure.
Yeah, he was telling me, I had lunch with him the other day, and he was saying June of last year, he stopped using vMix calls completely.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and
he is the poster child. He did beta test with it, and he did an event for us using it, and it was incredible. It was a celebration for the California State Parks Porch Project. So if you want to see an example of his work, I could give you a link.
Oh, that'd be wonderful, please.
I'm just John at csumb.edu. That stands for Cal State University Monterey Bay. So it's John at Charlie Sam Uniform Baker.edu, and I'll send you the link.
One more time, John. John.
Just JOHN, and the rest is CSUMB. That's the initials of California State University Monterey Bay.edu.
Okay. Hey, thanks. Well, thank you very much, Guy. Thank you very much, Rupert.
Good thing.
Yep, a room full of knowledge, thoughts, and ideas. That's what it's all about. Ward, how are things going in your world?
Oh, I just thought of another question.
Okay.
If I may. So currently right now I'm using two APC 40s as my audio mixers so that I can have 16 channels of audio and can control each one independently. I'm using central control to bring them in so that vMix can identify each one individually as a separate controller, which is working great, fantastic. The only thing is the sound person usually needs to grab my mouse in the middle of the show to open up the equalizers to EQ a microphone if it sounds really bad. Is there a USB 8-channel equalizer out on the market that I could plug into, bring into central control to take control over, so that the sound guy has control over, physical pots of EQ? Anybody have any clues or a workaround to that?
I've been experimenting with just the little Korg Nano Control too. And it just gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 8.
Hello.
8 sliders that you can connect in with vMix or.
8
That's
sliders,
not my noise,
okay.
is it?
No, wasn't me.
I think we got it.
So I guess I'll just go on the internet and search for something that has at least low, mid, high, at least 3 pots per channel. And then in central control, I can map them to those buttons. Is that the way it would work?
Possibly. That device wouldn't help you on that. That's more just main faders. For,
okay.
I know that Greg Gibson is using, I'll put this device in the chat, but it's the Behringer X Touch. It's $599. And I think that might do the trick. You might want to, it's got the motorized faders, and that's what him and Churig and a couple of these other guys that are doing the cloud stuff are using it. I haven't bought one yet. I need to make a few more bucks to get myself one too, but that seems to be the popular piece right now. $599 on the X Touch. You can also look at some of the stuff by Icon. Those would be the other ones.
Okay, yeah, my APC 40 has exactly the same control, so that would be redundant. Okay, well, I'll just keep surfing the internet and hopefully find something. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Successes, experience, questions for the group? Kuhn?
Yes, I have one more. What would be the proper workflow for someone sharing a PowerPoint presentation? Usually, the speaker is starting a PowerPoint in developing mode, starting presentation mode, and then sharing it. And it's of sharing it, starting in developing mode, and then presentation mode. So it doesn't. It's not a share screen is only admitted to other screens when it's completely built up, when it's ready to start. What's the best way to do that?
Well, I get my first piece of feedback would be practice. Practice with, the speaker who's going to be doing that. Shortcut keys. So did you broke up a little bit. Did you say that the speaker has one or two monitors?
One, just one.
Just a
Yep.
single monitor. Yeah, I mean that certainly, adds a challenge, but it doesn't make it at all impossible to still be fairly smooth. What a lot of people don't realize is when you put PowerPoint into presentation mode, so full screen mode, you can still Alt Tab back to other applications.
Yes.
And so I would recommend that they before they ever share is start PowerPoint. If they're on a PC, I hit F5, which puts it into presentation mode in full screen. Most people will stop there and go, well, that's all I've got, and they don't feel like they can do anything else. And that's exactly where I would want them, is that full screen presentation mode. And then the question would be, well, how do I get back to Zoom to click on share? And that is to Alt Tab back to Zoom.
Yes.
Click on the share button. In the share dialog, they'll see one of the screens be their full screen PowerPoint, and they'll select that and click share, and bingo, it'll be an instant full screen share. Anybody else have any other ideas or thoughts on that?
My like ideal solution would be for them to have additional monitor. It's $100 fix. You share that screen, and what's on that screen is what is being shared, and that's
absolutely
you share the screen for sure.
I've got a button onto my Stream Deck now that just brings up the share screen or just Alt S. And if the PowerPoint's ready and they just do Alt S, they can within 4 seconds or less have the shared show up as long as it's running in slideshow mode, or do what we spent a couple of weeks working on and do the advanced slide control and let somebody else run it and give them control over just forward and backwards, somebody that knows how to share the screen for them, and then they can give control back to the presenter for just the forward and back arrows.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you very much.
What I've done is
sometimes
I'll use a second computer or my tablet to monitor the broadcast if I'm, so to speak, if I'm doing it that way.
Yeah, a second computer, second monitor definitely comes in very, very handy. I know it's not always possible, and whether it's budget, whether it's desktop space, whatever the case may be, it's not always possible. So but the question is it still doable? If I were to walk through and challenge myself in front of everybody here, I'm going to So I have 3 monitors on this PC, which is the host of the Zoom meeting, and it's my vMix box. On monitor 2, I have the gallery view of this Zoom meeting, which is as well where my toolbar is for the share button and so forth. So I've opened PowerPoint. I'm going to drag PowerPoint on top of Zoom to simulate a single monitor experience, right? And at that point, I'm going to open a presentation. I'm going to now press the F5 function key. Oh, I need to set up my slideshow. It opened on the wrong monitor. Okay, so now on my monitor 2, I'm full screen PowerPoint slide. I can't see anything else there, but I'm going to Alt Tab to my Zoom meeting window. So now it became the forward application. I'm going to click on share, and I'm not going to share the screen. I'm going to share the PowerPoint that is not the PowerPoint application, kind of slide thumbnails and slide, but the one that's the full screen slide. And I'm going to click on share, and you should instantly have seen just an immediate full screen slide at that point. Are we agreeing on that? Was that what you guys got at the end? So that was a single monitor experience, and you know, it's certainly doable, but what becomes the challenge is it's a combination of knowledge, right? It's a combination of knowledge of you know, Zoom and Zoom sharing, and Zoom not. I mean, some people really are only ever comfortable sharing the screen instead of maybe a partial screen, or realizing that they may click on share and see all the options, screens and open applications, but but they've never hit share after they've put PowerPoint in a presentation mode. And because that creates a brand new thumbnail that can be shared, which is just that full screen PowerPoint as well. So to know that that becomes available dynamically when that presentation mode is active is good. But then the other part is being familiar enough with your operating system, be it Mac or Windows, to be able to Alt Tab or Command Tab between the open applications and to be able to switch through those seamlessly as well. So it practice.
And in that work case, when you
sometimes it's hard to say practice when you don't know what to practice. Sometimes it's training, right?
Right.
And you actually have to walk somebody through it.
When you stop presentation in PowerPoint in that use case, that will cease the screen share because the window closes itself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's super convenient in the sense of when I'm finished sharing, just you can either kill the presentation like Rupert says, you know, sometimes as simple as a escape key, right? And or you know, click the stop share, which should float on top of your slide presentation but not show out to everybody. But when you saw my share, did you see any gray box overlays, anything like that? But I did have overlays. You know, the stop share button was up there and so forth. So certain computers display those grays, and there's ways to get rid of those, but most don't. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet. Yeah, I think I truly believe there's mastery behind sharing, the power of sharing, that a lot of us really don't. I'm not calling myself one, but a lot of us don't recognize that are available. Like you could have, you can have 3 PowerPoints that were all, you know, launch the PowerPoint, go Preso mode, launch the PowerPoint, go Preso mode, and you can actually share all 3 of those at the same time, showing one at a time. But now when you Alt Tab for Windows to go from one presentation to the other, they're already shared. And so it switches instantly without having to stop the share and restart a share and so forth. And so to know that you can share multiple applications at the same time and is, I think, very, very powerful as well, because it's all that pre-work that goes into, okay, we're ready to go live, and you get everything set up, and then you just alt tab your way through the different shares. And especially if you're like training a tool, if you're training PowerPoint, for instance, you could share the presentation mode and also the PowerPoint interface and just alt tab between them. A lot of people do that by sharing the screen, but there's some meetings you'll jump into and they're not your meeting. You're just a participant in that meeting, and some hosts will disable screen sharing. That's not wholesale, but they won't let you share your monitors, but they'll let you share the applications, and that's an option in the back. And that's just for safety's sake, so we don't see, your wallpapers or your pop-up messages and things like that. Keeps things a bit more secure.
Well, one of
That's
the
a
other
great
things
tip for
too
things like
that,
education.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
one of the other things that gets you into trouble is if you miss just one little option on in Zoom when you want to share the PowerPoint presentation, and in the Zoom options, if you don't click on share individual window under share applications, as opposed to share all windows. When you share all windows, which is what I had set, it doesn't give you the opportunity to share the presentation. It only gives you the opportunity to share the PowerPoint application.
Yeah,
so
I remember
that,
your post on
that can mess.
And
That was in my brain. Share all windows is the option you should be selecting, because it should give you the option to see all of the windows to share.
Pop that dialogue back up, would you?
Sure.
Because I mean, when you posted about that, in my head, I'm like, I think I was in my car, and I knew I thought I knew what the problem was, but I couldn't be verbose about it, right? So share individual. When you share an application, share the individual window of that application, or share all windows from an application. And when you have an application that's like multimodal and so forth, that's that. And there was somewhere that I had read some help, and I thought it was on this dialogue, but I'm not seeing that. I must have looked up a document.
Which one? It's basically all the.
Yeah, it's not here, and I don't think it's in the. I just recall reading an explanation that made more sense. Sometimes they talk in reverse, right? These options are checked for off, or checked to disable versus checked to turn it on, and sometimes we find ourselves having to read real carefully. But I don't see that that is helpful to me. I expected there to be a question mark with a little more explanation, but there's not. But
No, and it, like I say in my head, I want to see all the windows to have the ability to share. So share all windows seems to make more sense in my brain.
Yeah. So it's and that's the thing is, those dialogue settings we can oftentimes make changes in those dialogue settings during the meeting, but and we have to say, don't forget about those options when it comes to pop-up reminders. I mean, like on my laptop over here, it's the machine in the meeting called Streamer. It's here strictly to have a full screen view of this meeting in active speaker mode, and then I screen capture that with an NDI screen capture, send it over to vMix, and then vMix streams it out here to YouTube and Facebook. But all the pop-ups, will happen. So I have to go full screen on that Zoom client, so that then when I click on participants, because it's full screen, it pops up as a floating participants window. I drag that off to another monitor. Same thing with the chat window. I also open the settings dialog, pull that off. So if I need to make any changes, I can without it being on the streamed screen. And then there are some pop-ups. If I take a look at this, I added one more today on reminders, or yeah, pop-up reminders. Oh, I turned on do not disturb under the chat options. I turned on, for the first time, I've turned on do not disturb from 1:45 Central to 6 p.m. Central. And I didn't even get a record. I'm almost positive. I'd have to test this, but I didn't even get, I'm usually at the beginning of the meeting, I usually have to clear the recording notification and so forth. I didn't even have to clear the recording notification. And so I'm like, I might have found something. I need to go test and verify that. But I haven't touched that machine today, which is really, really unusual. Normally, I'm either not paying attention to it and somebody's chatting me, telling me to clear the screen of a dialogue. But I've been watching and I've gotten no messages that way, and there's nothing there, and the whole bit. I'm like, wow, something happened, and I think I may have found the magic on creating a uninterrupted screen. And so the stream, literally on this screen capture, the only thing showing other than my full screen right now is the little recording icon on the top left, and that's it. I mean, that is as clean as I've been able to get it, which is pretty impressive.
And back to the Zoom rooms, and just for Mike's reference, like this is one advantage of using the NDI outputs from a Zoom rooms feed, because they're completely clean. There's no risk of these other things coming into the feed. You're getting a feed designed for, onward transmission. So it's that's one thing that we lacked for a long time, was getting these clean feeds out of Zoom. And it's one way it can be achieved now is with the NDI in the Zoom rooms, and it's clean, which is the good thing about it.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I want to pull up something here. There are some release notes that I want to review as a group as well, but I want to share my screen. So Denise who manages the Zoom events Facebook group and so forth, she posted today this graphic. I'll just say this graphic. This is a Zoom webinar only. No vMix, no OBS. That's a Zoom webinar with graphics. So the two biggies are well, she actually put in 3 because she's in fact using the automatic virtual background. The backsplash image, calls it number 1, which is the background image of the Zoom client, be it in spotlight view or gallery view as well. And then the name tags too are all being produced by Zoom Webinar.
And is Zoom Webinar a separate service or integrated inside of Zoom?
Yeah, so there's Zoom has Zoom Meetings, which is meant to be a collaborative environment. You expect to be able to see and hear from potentially anybody in the meeting. Zoom Webinar, I describe it more as a theater for the audience. Come in, sit down, enjoy the picture and the sound, and then us managing that Zoom webinar along with the panelists, not the attendees, but the panelists are invited with a special link so that they can become present and part of the delivery of that webinar. Not necessarily meant to be interactive. there's little workarounds here and there for, usually small exceptions, but I think those are probably kind of the high level why webinar over meeting or meeting over webinar would be. Is it collaborative or non-collaborative?
And
If I can ask
a
the group,
webinar is a meeting with an audience. So the panelists in a webinar have basically all the same functionality that they would in a meeting amongst themselves, but with the
That's true.
addition of an added audience.
Yeah.
does the group think that Zoom webinar is a vMix killer?
No. No, I mean, right now, what we're looking at on my share, that is that is a pretty big step up for Zoom, right? But they're only going to be able to, custom tailor that so much, right? And so, I mean,
yeah,
that's a 2-up, but there's no cropping availability. There's no adding borders, you could just
well, I was
do
listening to
the
Andy.
background.
I was listening to last Test Kitchen, and Andy and the gentleman from Zoom, especially this gentleman from Zoom, clearly stated that Zoom is going after the events with a vengeance. They want to get a piece of that market, and that's what's kind of scaring me. Is my vMix machine going to be a dinosaur in a year or two?
George has had his hand up a few times. Maybe he wants
Yeah.
to come in on this.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt. Could the screen that you just had up, Jeff?
Yeah.
I had a couple of comments about it. If you could share that again, please. Okay, so in the discussion about sharing, I have never liked the way Zoom shares organically, right? So if you're in a webinar, typically you got this big view, and I'm going to mention monitors in a minute, but you get this big view of what's being shared and these little tiny postage stamp people next to it, which I just, that offends me visually. But what you've got here in this image is you've got two video feeds side by side. What I do a lot, and this takes some thinking about your slides, because they've got to be super simple, but I have the slide and the presenter next to each other because they're two panelists in a webinar. There are no other cameras on. There's no other person on stage. Anybody sitting in the audience. And what they get is the presenter in one frame and their materials in the same size in the next one. The biggest issue is you have a black background. But it seems to me if you do your presentation that way and you think about it, this just strikes me as a more balanced view, unless there's some reason to go giant and then you can pull the screen share off, even with those two on, and you still get the same, you just have to think about it and plan it. The other thing I wanted to roll back to is monitoring. I come out of broadcasting in licensed broadcasting. You have to monitor what you do live. You have to keep a copy of it. So it becomes embedded. And one of the things that I worked in radio for a bunch of years, and so you're on live radio and you have a show that lasts for 3 or 4 hours. You also have something called a logger tape because you're playing music and commercials and all that stuff. For the regulator, the logger tape might be 22 minutes of you talking over that 4-hour period. And a good boss would make you listen to it because you've got ticks and all kinds of other things. I think it's great practice to monitor and then to listen to what you're monitoring. I know that's kind of the side from the presentation issue and the sharing, but I just wanted to catch up. Thanks.
Yeah, I heard that 2 different ways. Like the monitoring as a host or as the speaker, as the panelist. That was one perspective I heard from your description. But the other one is an absolute must on live events is you have to have a view of what the audience is seeing. You can't just think, okay, this is what we're delivering. You have to see what you're actually delivering, and not from the delivery mechanism such as vMix or Zoom, but as an actual attendee. And so you can see what they're seeing. And the other thing is there's there's functionality inside of Zoom, you know. So if Zoom in fact is your theater, then it's really important that you see what you're delivering, and you know that delineator between, let's say, a share and a video picture. Commonly, you know, especially if they have side by side function turned on in their Zoom client, they can resize that, and they can make the small the same size as the share and so forth. But but that's the side by side. Now in webinar you can force side by side mode, but I would say it still doesn't come across obvious that they can resize those and so forth. And so it's part of it's, you know, what functionality, flexibility comes with because of Zoom, which allows the user to override their visual experience either to a minimal degree in webinar or to a significant degree using Zoom meetings versus what you're actually intending to deliver. And if you want, you know, really complete control of delivery, and it's like whatever they see in one single spotlight is exactly what you want to deliver, which could be slides and speaker or panelists and so forth. That will, I think, for a long time anyways, for, you know, the unforeseen future, will be a job for OBS or vMix or any of the other platforms that can produce that and then output that to a single spotlit video for the
I just
audience
add
to see.
one word: keynote.
Yeah, right, with live video.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a few comments on that slide though. Could we bring it back up, Jeff?
Yep.
There's a few things, and Mike, just to expand on your question too about the difference between meeting and webinar. So you have that, which we covered, and then you have Zoom events, and that's a whole separate platform. That's a whole another step up the ladder. And in Zoom events, you can build a whole event and schedule and sell tickets and stuff like that. And those events then can contain either web things that are like webinars or like meetings, sessions that are like meetings or like webinars. But you're right, the events business and the segment they're going after there is you know an evolution of meeting to webinar to events. It's separate, more layers of product, even more. But I've just got some comments and thoughts about what we're looking at right here in terms of this backsplash or whatever they're calling it. There's some things I think to keep in mind. What you see here isn't a video feed. It's something that's being layered together by the Zoom client. So it's replacing the Zoom client, in this case, is replacing what would otherwise be a black background with an image that you're specifying. It is then displaying two video boxes from two different video, participants. And those participants in this example have virtual backgrounds. Those virtual backgrounds are being generated by their local Zoom client in each of those participants. So it's effectively keying. So it's not as if what you're seeing here is being put together by a single engine like vMix and then presented as a single video feed to the client. That's not at all what is happening. And when we've seen the features of gallery view and things roll up into we've seen in the past inconsistencies. For example, if you were using Zoom to stream, if this was a meeting or a webinar or whatever that was also using Zoom being streamed to YouTube, we have in the past seen inconsistencies with what is ultimately streamed to YouTube versus what your actual live Zoom attendees are seeing. I'd be interested to see whether this actually streams to YouTube if you're using it to stream. It might, in which case, then great. But in the Zoom, as far as the Zoom client is concerned, you're also, like, I'm sure, going to get a different experience if you're on an iPad, on an iPhone, because it's not streaming this full frame of video like you're seeing here. That's being put together, so this isn't. It's a step towards branding for sure, and that's obviously the angle they're coming at it. from, but it
Yeah.
isn't, you know, a composited video feed.
Yeah, so a little bit more on this is the backsplash image, the wallpaper, if you will, has been designated by the host. In this case, this example that Denise has put up there, their virtual backgrounds have also been designated by the host. So anybody who joins the meeting, as long as their computer is capable of virtual background support, they will be using this designated virtual background. It will still be rendered on their client side, but it's meant to create the consistency, if you will, in the meeting in the meeting itself. So it just
Are
wanted
they
to
both
point
sitting
that
in
out.
front of a black background,
No,
or
no, I wouldn't
just in their
suspect
office
it.
space?
Denise, normally when Denise is in front of her camera, she's just in a living room type environment. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just the natural keying, which, you know, brings up, you know, the point of, we're not always, I mean, if we have a fairly solid background for Zoom to work off of, or even a green and designate green as the background, or another color that's consistent, we can get a better key from it. But if we just sit in a room with books and backgrounds and so forth, we're going to be at the mercy of what Zoom's technology can do for automatic keying of a non-professional background, if you will. So it's, you know, the majority of the picture always comes through pretty decent. It's just all the keying around the edges of people and fingers and things like that that oftentimes, too often, really fall apart. And
Probably be best just to send out a portable green screen to them. You know.
Yeah,
Jeff,
really anything solid, you know, any solid color. I mean, I don't know that there's really any. I haven't seen any super magic just because it's green for Zoom in particular. Like my gray background, which has a blue light on it at the moment, it works fantastic with Zoom. And it's just more about the consistency of the surface and the color of it.
And Zoom does have a very defined separate set of minimum system requirements for if you do have a green screen and if you don't. And it's the end result can vary, but you have to tell it, you know, I have a green screen or I don't, because if you don't, you have to meet a higher set of system requirements to even for it to even try to work.
Yeah. Their code does a lot more work on your computer to be able to do it without. Yeah, and if you tell it, it's a check mark. If you tell it, I'm still sharing there. Let me pull this up since we're on it. Share. So if we go to the video settings down to backgrounds and filters, you can you can pick a background, and so you can select one, and it says that I left it on green, but now I'll uncheck that. So I'll just pick one and you know just tell it to use it, and yeah, it does a decent job. That my camera source, if I do my cleaner source, now the bottom cleans up too because I had that frame around it from vMix. But if you in fact have, if I wanted to use a virtual background like I did this one a couple weeks ago for that New Year's Eve Friday, right? I did it with vMix, but I tested it in Zoom as well. I can tell it I have a green screen. When you do that, you can then see that box that showed up, that color picker. You can click on that, and you can get your mouse cursor up here, and you can tell it what color to key in on. And so I picked kind of the blue illuminated, color versus the darker. I'll pick the darker side, and you'll see I'll get a little bit more, but then it just is showing you through my eyeballs now to the background as well. But you have some pretty decent options to designate essentially any color, even beyond green. You would still say I have a green screen so that you can click on the color and click on your orange screen. If it was an orange screen, for instance, it just needs to know what color to primarily key off of.
Hey, Jeff, I got a question.
Yep.
You were talking about the backgrounds just a few minutes ago. Is there a way to send out one background for all participants? Or do you, besides emailing it to them?
That's a new feature in Zoom from your admin portal behind the scenes. So you can designate a virtual background. You can require a virtual background and define what virtual background. So it will deliver that out to everybody as they arrive. And I don't know, it's one of those things. If it's consistency. So I've done some jobs for like Johnson & Johnson, and they all came in with, and their part of rehearsal day was somebody's going to pass around a background, right? And they email it out to everybody. And so everybody ends up having, what corner am I at? Everybody ends up having their little logo in the top right corner, and it's consistent. But it's not a anything more than just a simple background, but the small logo is consistent so that you can distinguish. Like if every single person in the meeting is with J&J, I go, well, why do it then? But because if you're a mix of J&J and some other guest speakers and so forth, then you can distinguish between those that are with J&J and those that are not, which can become meaningful as well. But
Robert's got a overlay here, though, not a background, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. That we've been playing with overlays recently, and for logos for different companies, they actually work a lot better. But you need to spend some time to get the layout correct before you import it. And this is all done at the back end as well. So you can design and import your own overlays, which you see over here. Then you don't need that background of having a green screen or anything.
And I know, I think Lois does overlays as like the video filters as well, and so she can change filters as well. Why do I have that one?
This is a zoom filter, actually. This overlay.
Oh, this is a zoom filter.
Correct.
I'm going, why is that here already? But yeah, it's here. But there's our friendly sponsor, the DVE store. Is Guy still here? He is. Guy forever has graciously provided this Zoom meeting at 1080, so that we've always had the best experience.
So on that,
I was just going to ask you that. Your image quality is awesome.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
I wanted to ask about that because to the best of my understanding, if you were lucky, if for people who do have the 1080 meeting, which again, Mike, for your reference, is a pretty high level of privilege in Zoom. By default, a Zoom meeting will pass resolution at 360. I think there's things you can do to get up to what they would call HD, but it's HD at 720. And then to get up to 1080, you really have to jump through some hoops. So we are in a 1080 meeting now, but not every Zoom meeting will be 1080 or even 720. But to the best of my understanding, if you are in a 1080 meeting, if you use virtual anything, you'll go down to 720. And so right now, Jeff, I'm getting you at 1080. Can you do a virtual background something? Oh, you've got a filter. So I'm still getting
I
you.
see what you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm still getting, because the machine, so you've got a filter.
It down.
You're saying with my filter, you're still getting me
I'm
at
still getting 1080.
Now I'm going to go ahead and
if you go
add
virtual
a
background.
Yep.
So Rupert, where do you see that he's coming in at 1080?
So, okay, now it's gone to 720. So if you go to your, if you can open your, yeah, you've gone to 720. If you open your Zoom settings where you'd normally get to your general settings or your audio settings, just the settings window, you can get to that.
Green shield, top left corner, or settings anywhere, but green shield is kind of front screen.
Green shield.
Keep in mind you're in screen share mode, Jeff, so it's going to affect the resolution as well. You might want to drop that.
Yeah, I was just sharing kind of how
I'm only getting 320, 180, but from
both
in and out
right
now.
And then if you get, once you got to your setting, if you get to your settings window, then you go to your statistics tab, which is third from the bottom on the left. And then you'll get your statistics there. And it should tell you what you're receiving and what you're sending. So here's the thing. Here's my 2 cents on virtual backgrounds, because one of the reasons people do it is branding and consistency. What it really generates is more inconsistency, because let's say you got a meeting of 10 people. Every one of those will have 10 different environments, 10 different system performances, and the keying and the virtual backgroundness will be successful to a varying degree with each person. So it becomes inconsistent. The experience will be inconsistent. It also means that if you are in a 1080 meeting, it appears that it's going to drop them to 720. And it also has
your recording was going to jump around.
Right. And the other thing is it from a accessibility point of view, if I haven't vision, having 10 people that look the same on the screen is no good to me. I actually want to be able to tell some difference, tell who's who by the way they've presented themselves or their background or whatever you get. You can visually understand who's who. If they're all the same, your ability to do that is reduced. And even if you can, again, from an accessibility point of view, if you have parts of their face melting away and the thing doing all the crazy stuff that a bad virtual background does do, that's an accessibility nightmare. There's maybe the only real reason for like a blurred background is for privacy reasons. The branding, I think people are on the whole doing a bad job at branding with virtual backgrounds. So it's bad branding actually is what it is. So there's very few reasons why any of this virtual background stuff is a good idea, in my opinion. I'd
love to add to that if I could real quick, Jeff, before we bounce from that topic, because that's exactly what's happened for both of the recent PHI events that we've done for the Public Health Institute. They always want to bring in the virtual background. They always want to make a screen with a nice little Canva background that shows some flow or whatever to it. And it isn't until the minute we put 4 people on the screen with that background that they realize it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
We always tell them, just remove the virtual backgrounds completely from everyone. And it's been always their thought. No, we want to try it again. We want to try it again. And every time just before the production, it gets canned because it doesn't work. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look professional. And it's actually a brain. It can really mess with your head and give you a headache if you have 10 different backgrounds, all the same with somebody else's name in each box. You're like trying to follow the flow and there is no flow. It's literally clashing into your head in ways that I can't explain fully.
I totally agree with Laura's point. When Laura stated here in the chat that she doesn't think the key in Zoom is the best. And boy, she's right about that.
The Zoom meetings we've seen with the Zoom participants, their branding and everything is, and their faces are diminutive. And so the corporate Zoom example hasn't been very good in my experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, 2 years ago, even this last year, I think this last Zoomtopia was much improved over 2 years ago. But 2 years ago, their virtual backgrounds with their speakers, all day, for 2 days was horrible.
And Jeff, they're not consistent between, the Zoom people. We see 2 or 3 different people from around the Zoom world, and they all look different. Their heads are in different place. Their graphics are different. It's very unprofessional.
Virtual backgrounds were a way to get people onto the platform because it enabled people to get some real quick privacy and not get around some hurdles that maybe were behind them. But we should be, I think, moving on from that now. So it was a pathway to help us get to where we were, but we need to move on from virtual background.
Yeah, the trigger. I was trying to figure out what was the trigger to the behavior, right? And everybody was at home, right?
Too many bookshelves.
And
The
way
mess.
too many people were unprepared, whether it was cleanliness, size of room, kids in the background, whatever the case was, right? Everybody's at home and no one had an option for that, right? And so I think the, you know, the ability to resolve it to a certain degree was imminent, and they did an amazing job on how quick they turned that around. But then once, you know, some people are bold enough to say, God, this just looks like garbage, then a few of them start, you know, making purchases and figuring it out and maybe tuning into office hours and so forth to try to, you know, make it better. But I'll tell you, you know, kind of like Ray was saying there, when professionals in this industry, I've got pictures. I've got pictures of people I worked with who have been producers and other technical directors and so forth. And oh, it's horrific. I mean, just like this one was just sitting way down in the frame, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, it was crazy. I mean, it was so bad a few different times. I literally just took a picture of my screen and just go, these are people in the business. You know, it's
Yeah.
like of all the people that we would want to lean on to lead by example, it should be the people in the business who who are offended by seeing it all day, every day, right? And and so it's one of those things. It's just not
I,
a have to
I
anymore.
think we're
There's
in
just
real
too many
trouble if we,
options.
right. I think we're in real trouble if we start enforcing virtual backgrounds in meetings. I mean, if
Oh.
I go into an event where a virtual background is I'll just walk out and leave. I'm not going to be
I'm on board with
participating in
you,
that.
Rupert. I'm with you. Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
I
want
have
to
to run,
add,
gentlemen. I have to run. Thank you so much for all your help, your wisdom, and your solutions. Thank you.
You bet. Take care, Peter. Laura, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that to go back to a little bit more maybe drastic of what Rupert is saying, virtual backgrounds at the wrong frequency and the wrong rate of flash can actually be dangerous. The words that I encourage everybody to use when you're talking to people is photosensitivity.
Yeah, years ago, 10, 15 years ago, I would walk into a room because I was a traveling trainer, and I would walk into a room, get things all set up, and every once in a while somebody would come up to me and say, if you plan on using a laser pointer today, please don't. And you know, you have to respect accordingly and don't, because I mean, I can't relate to what it causes for them in their head and eyes and so forth, but I can only imagine it can't be good to have to you know, make special requests and so forth. So yeah, even something as simple as a laser pointer, and some people more sensitive to red ones versus green ones and so forth as well. But yeah, then the virtual background.
OSHA has a laser safety rule that you should look up. It's more for industrial stuff, but it's good information in general.
Good stuff. Robert?
Yeah, I know I'm lagging a bit, but you talked about giving everyone a green screen who's going to be presenting something or want them to look good during an event. We just held an event where we actually sent out 24 green screens to the panelists, and they were blue and green. You can get them. We got them from Amazon and delivered. And just to share some of my experiences with them, because it didn't work completely as well as we expected. We ended up buying HD cameras for them because we found that the cameras have more influence on the ability to be able to clean the image than anything else. And the second thing was, of course, the background lighting, because we got into really messy situations where people had small rooms, had green screens very close to them, had lighting from the front, throwing shadows onto the green screen. I mean, it's easier said than done to send out green screens to a mass of people and then manage those people in real time at the same time to get on board on the screen at the same time. It's a challenge and a half.
Yeah, no question. Because you know, the solution doesn't come only and exclusively by the color grade, right? It comes from the distance the subject is from, that the screen should ideally be lit by a source that is at or behind me, so it's not illuminating me, it's just illuminating the screen. I have my own lights. There's a whole science to it if you really want it to come across very well. And and that, I'll tell you, I mean, I don't claim at all to be an expert on it, but I've learned a lot in the last year and a half or two, because I went at it initially going, oh yeah, we'll just green screen this, having no idea what kind of challenge I was up against. But I luckily I had a couple of people that were close and easy to reach that had some really good counsel on making it happen. So.
And it becomes a real challenge for the people who are participating, because instead of just presenting themselves and talking, they're involved in technically setting up this equipment behind them. Even though we had a person assisting them, a person who knows what he's talking about and is very good at coaching, it was a real challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from the amount of light, the color of light, I mean, there's so many variables that I think sometimes I would be apt to forget about them, because I just turn things on here in the studio versus going out in the field, or having to reach through the screen and coach somebody with all the different variables of windows and light bulb colors, and all, oh man, a lot of variances. So it's hard to make it perfect, but I think we can all make it better, and my vote personally would be, if an organization was apt to enforce a virtual background for consistency across the company, I would vote that they order, print, and ship wallpapers that everybody hangs behind them. And just make that the, whatever they were going to have as the virtual background, just make it a wallpaper that I can hang behind me. Give me the hanger and the real thing. Yeah. And so it's the same result, but it's much better, in the sense that you don't have to rely on technology, let alone it lowers the resource requirements on everybody's computers as well. And and then, no matter whether they're on an iPhone or a tablet or a Mac or a PC, a physical background is a physical background, but yet everybody's consistent too. So, it. I don't know that I've seen that happen yet, but who knows? It might, or it could. But so much relies on the purpose of the meeting too. What's the purpose? What are they looking to gain, and so forth. So. Ooh, George, you got your hand up.
I do. Thanks, Jeff. I cannot agree more with Leland and Rupert about the horror of virtual backgrounds. I'm on office hours and after hours a day. I edit video. I'm working on live streaming projects. I attended a conference about a month and a half ago, and it was backgrounds everywhere. And after 8 hours, I could hardly see. And I ended up like this. These are reading sunglasses that are designed to just cut glare, like seriously cut glare. I've just started working without them about a week ago. It's that bad. I mean, it really is. Laura's so totally right. It is just horrible. And I've been live streaming for a really long time, mostly in person, and now for about 6 or 7 years using Zoom. And the best thing to do is to get a really nice design, go to a print shop, like Kinko's or whoever you have, Staples. Get something printed on foam core. It's light as can be. It's the stuff they use for political signs. It'll stand the weather. You can get it flat, so you're not going to get a lot of reflection, and put that behind people. And it's cheap as dirt. You can stick it on the wall with a bit of, duct tape if you need to. cheap, simple, looks great. You can make a big one if somebody's got a big space they need to cover, and it does not cost very much. And you can have it relatively close behind you without throwing shadow. All you need to do, angle stuff. Anyway,
George, it's very important that it comes matte and not glossy.
Totally.
That is a killer. Everybody who does a campaign sign or anything and prints it in glossy and doesn't know to expect the ambient light that you can't control. So I like your idea, but make a point of making sure that it's printed on a matte surface and with matte ink or labels or whatever.
Any little print shop can do that. I mean, they all do it, right? It's trivial stuff. It's so inexpensive. It lasts forever. And take care of it. You can carry it around. You can move it. We used to set it up on our signs on a tripod behind speakers, and it was out of the way. It looked really nice, and it covered up a lot of sins.
How about this? Right here. You can see it. There's a place online I got it, something banners. I can look it up and share a link, but I think it was about $100, and I have a half a dozen of them, depending on what I'm presenting. But to your point, it is in matte. My lighting, I don't have my lighting set up very well in here, but it, behind there is like, my house, and so this is just a way to kind of keep people focused, so they're not, looking through somebody's shelves and whatnot. It's just pretty straightforward.
Agreed.
And that's one other thing I just want to touch upon. You mentioned lighting. If we could convince every person that gets into Zoom to have proper lighting, the virtual backgrounds would not be so bad, and they wouldn't be as brutal on the eyes as they are with the breakup of the aura around the individual, because then the computer could do what it needs to do and your camera can do what it needs to do. It's really not having that light makes the camera struggle, and that's what makes it look so terrible. So if we could always convince them to have that 5K lighting, the bright white regular daylight lighting, and not using yellow lights or any other type of hued lights, you'd have a lot more success with them. But
well, and just think about the layers. One thing that you don't have to teach anybody, they'll never let go of, and they'll hold you to it forever, is called their expectations. Right? Their expectations is that it looks good and it sounds good and so forth, but yet they've shown up with a 2012 Mac, an old Logitech camera that can't even do, HD, for instance, and then you layer virtual background technology on top of the software, and you layer and you layer and you layer old to new technology and so forth, and things just crumble. It's crazy. I think we all have to really keep track of where are we, what kind of personal investments are we making, not just financially. I mean, gosh, the light that's lighting my blue behind me is a clamp-on can light, I mean, but it all by itself, it's, cheap from Home Depot. I've got some nice lights and LED panels in front of me, but the investment I made in the can light was the RGB bulb that's inside of it, right? And I can control the color and the temperature and the brightness and so forth. And so, invest where it matters. And, is everybody going to go run a Canon EOS, mirrorless camera and a 2470 L series lens? Only because I came into this space as a photographer, a hobbyist photographer for years and years and years. So I happen to have it. But, I've never asked anybody to go spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a lens and a camera to look good, because when you can go out and spend easily less than $200 now. It used to be the going price is $200 for a Logitech Brio, which is a HD webcam. Now I see them at like, $150 or so, and they've come down, quite a bit in the amount of time, and they create a great picture, but they don't do it on their own, right? They do it with, good lighting as well, and and so forth. So it takes. But I went on the road this last week. I tried to connect with Rupert, but our schedules didn't quite line up. But I went down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and but I brought my two little pixels that are just little LED panels that you can control tons, color, light, brightness, everything, and just set them up on the sides and turned them on and opened my laptop and connected my Brio, and that was my mobile kit. I got there and I was kind of screwed on audio because I don't even know where it is. I found and took out my Tech Rise so I could plug it in the USB and plug in a headset and an earphone, but by golly, when I got there, I couldn't find it, and I haven't been able to find it at home either. So I don't know where it disappeared to. But even when you're on the move, you can you can make do. I will say I used a blurred virtual background because my brother-in-law's office was a freaking disaster, and so I just blurred that out, which I really didn't enjoy. But it was that or show them everything. But
99% of the time, that's all they're used for, Jeff. Honestly, we know that. But
oh yeah,
like what you're seeing right now, this is an Avaya shuttle or an Avaya huddle cam with the green screen, the wrinkled green screen that you saw behind me running the virtual video background. So the lighting that I was able to find, which is really inexpensive for anyone building a quick home studio, it's a LED light bar available on Amazon for $25 basically, and it's a 5K light, so that's the light intensity of the light, and you can interconnect them and string them along and put them all the way around your walls if you wanted to, just by daisy chaining them together. So I'll try to share that with Jeff so that he can share it with his audience sometimes. So you've got one of those lights, because that's all I have in this studio is that one light, and it makes this type of effect work. So I just like to recommend that to people.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Well, Rupert, you have your hand up. Actually, there's a few. I think Leland's can come down. Is that fair, Leland? Okay. But before I move on to release notes, I want go ahead and Rupert.
Yeah, I was just going to. Privacy is the one thing where you can understand where the blurred thing particularly gets used, and I think some other use cases that people do use a virtual background and use it in different locations, and to present a consistent image. And then you have the other features which come with these things, like the touch-up image and the enhance and all this stuff. I think in a world where Zoom is or video is all we have, I think I just wonder whether we're diminishing the authenticity too much. I want the people who see me to believe that they're getting an honest image from me, not that it might have been doctored along the way. I think that's really important. So I was just cautious.
That's only because you're young and have smooth skin, Rupert.
I want to believe I'm getting a consistent image from everybody, because then we can believe it. If you can't believe it, then where did we go from there?
No, here. So I'll to your point. So let me. Not that I enjoy spotlighting, but I'll spotlight myself and I'll crank up touch up my appearance, and there's my ultra smooth, almost blurry face, right? But Zoom offers that to where it's not on.
I think if Zoom's going to go to the extent of warning me that the meeting's being recorded and warning me that the meeting is being streamed, I think it ought to warn me that, one, I might see some bad virtual backgrounds, but also warn me that what I'm seeing from the other person isn't truly what their camera is seeing.
What you're seeing isn't a real; they are fictitious characters.
What's that?
Good point. Objects that you see do not appear. Objects in the mirror are not as close as they appear.
Yeah, that's true. So true.
I got this neat background, but it's not wide enough for my camera.
Yeah.
So I may have to get another one.
Zoom in. That's all. Just zoom in a little closer.
Yeah, you are.
The camera doesn't zoom.
I ran with a curtain this big for years, honestly. I think for the first broadcast that we did at 640, 480, and we just got right in the face so that you wouldn't see all that big curtain behind them. Because what are you doing? Talking heads? They should be talking heads. So.
Yeah.
My camera doesn't zoom in though.
I can see. I must have rattled my camera because I can see the edge of my. There we go. But Yeah, I think I mean, I think that's a 5 or 6 foot backdrop behind me, but just with a little bit of zoom in and so forth. Yeah, usually you can get them to fit. But what kind of camera are you running, Pete?
Amcrest. That's what it says.
Just a fixed lens on it.
Yeah, it's just a fixed lens.
Gotcha.
If I run this through the camera through OBS and then OBS into Zoom, I can zoom in, so to speak, with that. But
Hey, Jeff, if anyone comes to you and says they can't afford a C920 because they're still, 60, 70, 80, 90 bucks for some of the lower budget people, they can't. The C620 is still a 1080p camera available by Logitech, and it is awesome quality for like $35, literally, sometimes $49 to $35 to $49. So
you can use your cell phone as a camera into Zoom. I don't know if you've been able to do that with your desktop, and there's a program called, let me find it, Droid Cam for Androids, and there's another one that does Androids and iPhones. It's just basically taken. You can either do it wireless through your home network or through a USB wire to your computer.
Yeah. Tony, who's been logged in this meeting today, and might just be able to listen as all, but Tony's been on. I think he's changed now, maybe, but he's been on the iPhone with I believe the HDMI dongle out, and I think he's using Filmic Pro on the iPhone, HDMI out into a capture device into his Mac. And
like anything, I'm from an iPhone 10 upwards. If you do it via HDMI specifically with something like Filmic Pro, can look really good.
Oh, I haven't bought a mount yet for my iPad. I have an iPhone 8, and it does good, looks good. But my newest iPad, which is the M1 version, if I had a mount, I'm just going to challenge myself to get the mount so it can be here. But I've done Filmic on it and so forth. It is phenomenal. I mean, the quality is just outrageous, and it could very well blow away my mirrorless that's in front of me, and it's just amazing. And I think this iPad actually comes into Zoom as a 16:9, like finally. And
at 720 though, I don't think it'll do the 1080.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, no, if I came out HDMI though,
HDMI, right? Yeah.
It'll come through at 1080. But anyways, George, you've been waiting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I do run into a situation where I'm doing events that have presentations in them. So somebody's making, a presentation from the chair or the financial officer, that kind of stuff. And yes, I think I've seen all the oldest laptops on the planet in the last 2 years. So I have a solution where I can deal with this. I send them a professional video camera. I send them lights. I send them a tripod. I send them a teleprompter, and I send them an experienced network cameraman who shoots them, sends me the video, and we're done.
Yeah, problem solved.
Always a good way to do it. When kits are available or affordable. We did the Public Health Institute event, and they would not budget for kits, which was really sad because you've got some of the most top level doctors. We had judges, district attorneys, attorney generals. You had people who should have kits that they just would blow it off. They're like, nah, we don't need them. They can come in on their laptops from home. So it's really a matter, like Jeff said, of perspective and what the client expects. So if the client's not all drummed up about needing 4K or 1080p video, then you need to kind of set that right at the beginning and establish that quality of product before you begin, because you can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of resources trying to develop that really high quality product, and it might not really be what your customer needs. It's just one of those things. But I want to throw a side note in real quick. Leland Mosley, you are the second Leland I have sat in a room with in the last 2 days, And it's one of the rarest things that'll ever happen to a Leland is to sit in the same room with another Leland. So I just wanted to say hello. And
hey, Leland, how are you?
Found it interesting that this has happened to me 2 days in a row now. So it's kind of freaky.
That's wild.
It's got a great name, that's why. Can I add something to what Leland was saying as far as kits? What I found that actually works really, really well, I posted it in the notes, Facebook portals. It's a great camera. Zoom's already built in. They just click a link, and actually the light from the portal sometimes is sufficient, but obviously I would send a kit light with it, and I just let the client have it. They're roughly $100, and I'm just like, here it is. That's built into the price. Other than that,
that's a good idea.
Everything's going well.
I managed to get a 720 account by request. And the way I did that was told them that I am doing event production and using Zoom as the primary tool to broadcast the event from a webinar, from a meeting into a webinar or whatever you need to tell them. That can help you push forward to get a 720 account, but it's got to be focused toward event production.
It's easier than
720 now is easier.
Oh,
yeah,
is it? They're giving it away?
Sam from Zoom has said it twice to us now. He says, Zoom has announced it. Anybody, cool. They're not saying everybody gets 720, but they are saying anybody can ask for it and get it. But they're still at a business or enterprise account for the 1080 requests. But everybody can get 720 these days. They just submit your request, they say. So
on a paid account, it needs to be at least a paid account.
Not a free account. Right. That's true.
Leland, if I may, just before we go off this one,
gotta use last
I
name
understand exactly what you're saying about, not everybody wants to look like network television, but some of it is embarrassing. And so what I typically do is have a short session with them, and I make my stuff look, I often have my wife do it because she's way prettier than I am. And we do a recording and we send it to them. And they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea I looked and sounded so bad. And I wait and I pray that they're on Wi-Fi and they're through their presentation or saying their name. And I'm telling you, it's surprising how often that turns the tide.
That's an amazing concept because I've done so many prep checks for people, all of these, that we do ahead of time, 50 speakers at a time usually. So, and that takes place in the course of usually less than a month because you have to lock them all down and say, okay, get them in here fast and we'll just run through them one at a time and give them a tech check. And a lot of times the one thing we have to watch is being critical, because if you're overcritical with a CEO, you might never come back. You have to make certain that you're just letting them know, we want you to look your best. We want you to sound your best. We're giving you every possible option to make it look that way for you. Never criticize them. That's the biggest thing you want to avoid.
I think the other thing is to help them not, like George says, help them not be embarrassed. I mean, if you're dealing with an event, or chances are now, if we're doing our jobs correctly and just natural things are happening, you're going to have over time more and more people looking better, sounding better. And now our job is to, help the folks who are not at that level say, look, there's going to be some other folks in this meeting that are going to look quite a bit different. And we want you to be up to the same level.
Ray, how do you get some of your C-levels to buy into caring? Your mic is muted.
My biggest advantage is that I'm a third party. I'm not the production company. I'm not somebody from corporate that's training these people, that's qualifying them and taking them through the process. And so I'm a guy who can get fired, and yet I've got the credentials, and I'm regularly engaged with some of these clients where the higher level bosses say, this is where you need to go. The problem is with the volunteer associations, because they have to treat their members, especially their special guests, they have to treat them with kid gloves. And the idea of recording them and sending it out to them, it works almost all the time.
Cool. Good stuff.
Yeah, we always try to at least
that's
provide
a great
proof
idea
too. Yeah, when we do our tech checks, or if we're doing pre-records, we'll usually do a proof to them so that they can see it. That way, in case we do have to make any edits due to political conversations that probably shouldn't have been made in the interview or what have you, because some things can be very sensitive, as we all know, and sometimes that stuff has to be removed. So
yeah,
we like to send them that.
I'll give you an example of what to raise and George's point. This was about audio, but I was somebody came to me saying they were having audio problems in Zoom, and so I was trying to establish whether it was what they were hearing or how other people were hearing them, and they immediately told me, well, they have no idea how other people are hearing them. They've got no complete. They've got no. A lot of people have no idea how they sound. None.
Yep.
You have to be aware of that.
Yeah,
I
it's
worked
true.
in
Most of
radio
us
for
don't
years,
either.
and people would come in and we'd interview them and they'd hear themselves, and they had literally, most people do not know. And it applies to here as well. It's so basic. And to that point, most people have no idea how light works.
We can't.
The problem is that your eyes see different than a camera does. A camera will show all imperfections in light that you have. Your eyes kind of open up and adjust automatically.
I think our eyes see really well, quite honestly. I think our brains give the tolerance. Like our brains soften it all up, and it's like, we don't care,
Well, what you find though is there's a lot of enhancements to the cameras, especially webcams that are automated, and a lot of that stuff gets failed to turn off, like any of it, really. All of these little fancy features
The
that they've
vivid
done to make you look
colors, yeah,
better on camera. You
absolute
better go
sharpness.
straight camera and just come in with some good light, and make sure it's white light. Just try to avoid any yellow or blue lights.
And in people's defense, there's a lot of maybe conflicting advice out there. I mean, sometimes people will say, oh, if you've got natural light, use that. That's great. And there's some truth to that, of course, but it's very unpredictable.
Hard
And
to control.
It's going to change over the course of. So if you're doing a 5-minute segment to camera and you've got some natural light, then maybe. But if you're in an event, or you're doing anything on a consistent basis, then just forget it.
Most people don't have to white balance their eyes.
That's it right there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think, I think our brains are pretty forgiving. They really are. It's, we can tolerate and quickly adjust to very tungsten-driven rooms versus fluorescent classrooms. I'm sitting in I'm surrounded by 5600K light, and we adjust and so forth. But it's when our brains our brains see it, our eyes see it, and that is when you have 3 monitors from 3 different camera sources that don't match, bingo, all the alarms go off, right? So it's not that we don't recognize it, it's just when it's in motion and so forth, we're not looking back on the past, we're just moving forward. So there's a lot of forgive. It's where snapshots on pictures, stills, capture. I took tens of thousands of photographs of my daughter when she was ballroom dancing, and we would trash 95% of them at least, just because you're capturing a still moment of a moving art, and it's really hard to get one that not only looks good, but when you see it, you can actually say, that's a cha-cha, or that's a tango. Right? You can see and feel the style in a still photo as well. It's pretty interesting stuff. Robert, you've been up there with your hand up.
Go ahead.
We've actually stopped inviting people for tech checks because everyone thinks they're an expert on Zoom, Teams, or whatever it is, Blue Jeans. And so the only way we can get people to come in to do these tech checks is to invite them for a pre-event rehearsal. And the rehearsal works. Everyone wants to see what it's going to look like. And when we give feedback at a rehearsal, it seems to go down better than during a tech check. It's not treated as criticism. It's treated as, oh, there's a fault with, I need to fix it.
Yeah,
And it's
no,
in front
that's
of the
fair.
public. It's in
And
front
they
of a
get to
bunch of
see their
people, so it-
peers. Like if you have some plants, you know, not customer plants, but plants on your own team that look exceptionally good and they wear the right contrasting colors and they're framed really well and so forth, there's some presence of excellent examples that maybe somebody will pop up and go, hey, how do we achieve that, you know? And and then when one of their peers does it, then it becomes really, really powerful, right? Is when they're seeing one of their peers look so good.
And a lot of thing in Zoom, like people will say, oh, I do Zoom all the time. Well, you may not be in an HD meeting in Zoom all the time. We're about to bring you into a 1080p meeting, and there's going to be people pushing, you know, high HD video at you, and you're going to look different.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to bring up, Rupert. I think that's one I've never brought up, and I'm kind of looking at myself going, why didn't I think of that? It's like that's
it's kind of hard. It's hard
It
to
is.
share with people, you know, that yeah, well, if you want to show your flaws and your skins to everybody, you know, it's like, I don't know if I want to really go there. But anyways, well, I've been waiting to pop this up, and the time's ticking.
Yeah, I gotta get played.
Just to review some of the release notes. They're all out there, and by the way, I don't know how many of you have looked at the documentation on Zoom's site, you know, in the past and recently, but they reformatted their support documentation like this page, and I really like what they've done with it. It's a lot easier to read and drill down, and they've got links here to download center and so forth. So anyways, and there's a lot of different ways you can find the release notes. You know, you can do it per platform, per date, and per product, Zoom product, and the whole bit. So
and you can subscribe to that page with an email alert, and that's really useful.
Absolutely, yeah. When there's something that is new, it just alerts you and lets you know. Yeah, because there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of release notes that come out, and some that just don't affect me at all. You know, because I'm not a Zoom phone user or Linux user, but everything, you know, continually gets better. So, but there's all, you know, they release them, the notes, almost always prior to releasing the product.
Yep.
And so you can see that in the upcoming release section. So right now that's empty, but the current release is 5.9.1, and 5.9.1 is somewhere close to that. 5.late 8 dot something is what's going to support that webinar background and name labels, and then there's also I haven't nailed this down yet. I think it might be webinar only, but custom galleries can now be saved and applied to a scheduled meeting. And
Really?
So it's interesting. So yeah, so
that's order. That's a gallery order, right?
Gallery order, yeah. Yeah. So you know, some you almost look over, but these are the release notes for December 27th. Just simple stuff, you know, minor bug fixes, security enhancements, not a whole lot of, you know, descriptive anything. Where sometimes I get like this one for 5.9.0, this is a very meaty release, and there's lots to read about. So I in the kitchen anyways, we kind of breathe through these and see, is the text big enough for you guys? Bump it up
yeah,
a little
it's
bit.
fine. Are they talking about a release 6 at all, Jeff, or is that still way down the pathway?
Can you zoom in a little, Jeff?
A little more?
Yeah, on smaller screens it probably is.
That work?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
I haven't seen anything on 6. Rupert, have you seen
No,
anything
if
on
you
6?
no, nothing yet. The other way you can see the what's coming is if you just scroll to the top, Jeff, at the very top, and then at the top where you've got the cookie crumbs, you've got the release notes. Just click on release notes, and then there's a by date section. Down, release names by date, and this tells you exactly what's coming up. Not exactly when, but when. yeah, this is when they release. And then if you click on there, it'll tell you what this release contains. So on this day, it's just for the virtual room connector. But you can go and then you'll see exactly what, because sometimes Zoom will say, hey, we've got a release coming up, but that actually means, hey, we're releasing a subversion of Zoom Rooms that day. It may not be like the Zoom client, Zoom meeting. So this is a good way of drilling down onto a particular release on a day and seeing what that day contains.
Yep.
But no, I haven't seen anything for 6.
I haven't either. So upgrade to 64-bit within check for updates. So when users are checking for updates. So this was, I tell you, I ran on 32-bit for the longest time because it was always the big blue button and not a small URL link. Right. And then the updates that followed, the auto updates, but the updates that I'd say, hey, check. Oh yeah, there's an update. It would just update 32-bit to 32-bit to 32-bit. Now, if your system is 64-bit, and you're on a 32-bit, during an update, it will actually fix that for you within it. So I say good call on their part. And my auto updates are working really, really well and smoothly right now. It's a really painless process to do when I launch Zoom. Observe privacy settings of calendar events. So when assigning scheduling privileges to other users in Zoom, users can choose if they can manage any meetings that were marked private in Google or Outlook.
Yeah, that was a problem for folks who were using the private flag in their Outlook calendars, and the Zoom sync wasn't. I don't think it was
respecting it.
Right. Yeah, and that led to some problems.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where Zoom can rebroadcast to YouTube, will it be able to rebroadcast to any other platform in the future?
Well, it can stream to YouTube now, it can stream to Facebook now, and it can stream to a custom RTMP stream. So that it's kind of everybody else. As long as they can ingest an RTMP stream, Zoom can output that as well.
Yeah, I guess the answer is Zoom can stream to anywhere that accepts RTMP. It just happens to have convenient settings for YouTube and for Facebook, but anywhere that'll accept RTMP, you can be streamed to.
Means you could split that signal 10, 20,
you can only stream one at a time, though. You can't stream multiples. So if you choose
Zoom,
YouTube, that's it. Facebook, that's it.
Anywhere else, like Restream or Caster, and send it to
If you did an RTMP to Restream, then let it do it your distribution. That's ideal. You're going to get 720 out of it. That's part of why we know we're in a 1080 meeting, right? So that's why I'll capture the desktop over here on my laptop into vMix, because vMix has the partnership with Facebook and YouTube to send and archive 1080 streams. And so streaming from vMix into Facebook, I'm streaming into Facebook right now at 1080 because of vMix, not because of Zoom. And so I'm not dependent on that Zoom stream at all. So, all right, back to this. Emoji support, something I kind of barely use, but they've expanded it to almost 900 emojis. That just doesn't seem convenient. That's a lot of things to sort through, but you can search and so forth as well.
I think the challenge is there has to be compatible with what people might send in. If they're typing it in, you know, like an ASCII, whatever the emojis are, Zoom needs to be able to render that. Otherwise it, just get lost in translation.
Yeah, true.
I see Discord has 1 million of them.
Yeah. This is a corporate feature when you're dealing with, GPO and MSI, global installs and updates and global policies and so forth, and corporate environments. Meeting and webinar features. Here's that save custom gallery view order. So meeting hosts can now save customized gallery view. And it says meeting and webinar. So I turned it on, but I don't see how to do it yet.
So you haven't found it?
It says can save customized gallery view order for subsequent meetings. The customized gallery order is saved to each unique meeting ID, which allows the host to load the saved customized order to avoid continually customizing the gallery order for each meeting. And
So it
I'm going
must
to
be in the back end.
mute you, Pete. I'm going to mute your keyboard.
Or under advanced.
So I got it turned on the background. I'm wondering, I didn't look. I'm wondering if I go up here to the Zoom Test Kitchen meeting. I can't edit it right now because I've got the meeting running. I'm wondering if it doesn't become a part of the schedule. Because I can customize the gallery, but I can't find anywhere to save. So I'm wondering if there's something to do with the meeting part of it itself. That I just haven't seen yet. So that to me that's somewhat promising, depending on your recurring meetings, and these particular folks are always there, because I imagine the definition can be partial, right? You've got these 4 people who are always stacked on the top and across, and if they're there, that's where they go, and if they're not, they don't, right? Would be my guess of the behavior, but I'll be interested in seeing that. Meeting features, same kind of thing here. So scheduling meetings with focus mode. So you can now schedule a meeting with focus mode to be started automatically when the meeting starts, which and good for education and lack of distractions and so forth. And also in meeting features, because breakout rooms aren't supported in webinar, you can disable the broadcast message from the host to breakout rooms. So admins on the account can now disable the ability for meeting hosts to broadcast all breakout rooms. You don't want that to be used. And then enhanced, I didn't read this one, enhanced panelist authentication. Oh, I think this might tie us down to the tightness of the Zoom events platform. Webinar hosts can now require panelists to be signed in with the account associated with the email.
Yeah. So if you
are set, so you have to be authenticated with an associated account.
And these must be
if you give away your link to somebody, and they don't have your Zoom credentials to be
right.
signed in as that account, they can't use that link you shared
right.
with them.
This does only apply if you have predefined your panelists. If you're promoting your panelists from attendees, it doesn't really have any bearing then.
Yeah. True. Yeah, that's a good point. Chat features. This is usually out of meeting chat though, which I don't leverage a whole bunch myself.
App chat, yeah.
Zoom app, phone, and then several resolved features. See if any catch your eye.
That's interesting. Resolved an issue.
Was present, so you had limited video quality, I guess.
And it's got resolved further down there. It's resolved an issue regarding 1080p video in gallery view. It's interesting.
Yeah, I wonder what that meant. I mean, I wouldn't expect 1080p in gallery view. It's too small. 8x9, resolved an issue regarding meeting titles. Short form, regarding short form YouTube links, not providing a link preview in Zoom chat. Proxies.
I have a feeling that 1080p gallery view, if I've been seeing what I think I'm seeing in Zoom ISO, is that sometimes the gallery view isn't a full 1080 scale for the fit to the screen. It's a little bit off and smaller than that size. I have a feeling maybe they just bumped it up and made it fit the full size of the frame.
The create, remove, rename breakout rooms after launch feature was pulled.
I wondered about that.
Due to issues with deployment. and we'll be able to say, yeah, I remember that announcement coming that we'll be able to make changes once we open them, but they did not release that after all. Okay, bummer. Oh well. Yeah, I love it when they want to get it right first rather than just release it. So that's good.
All right, Jeff, it's 5. I got to bail on you, but sorry I couldn't make it earlier. I was still in another webinar, but I want to talk to you about what I was talking with one of my friends in that webinar who presented it. You may be interested. So
okay, yeah.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Yep.
See you guys. Thanks a lot for coming.
Say, Leland.
See you next
Leland.
Jeff, one thing, if I can comment on these release notes. In December last year, they released a Polish version of the Zoom app. And this is something that I had put in as a feature request a year earlier. So it really gave me the confidence that putting in feature requests to Zoom actually gives you a result. Okay? So if we really want something, we should push it.
Absolutely. And I mean, not everything will make it through, but without anything at all, what can they possibly do? If you want something, you've got to ask for it.
They can't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
Right? None of us can, right? And so, no, you're right. I mean, I, like many, in my life around software, has been, it doesn't do that. So I just sit back and wait. Instead of just even just affirm, right? Repeat entries are a good thing, right? It just ups the ticker of priority from the community. And so no, I totally agree. And not just to put it in there, but you've actually, because you have seen results, and that is good stuff. One meant you put it in personally, but you weren't alone, but you didn't know the others, right? And so, yeah, it finally got itself going. So, great point. That is all I kind of had in my thoughts in pocket. Trying to figure out how I don't lose our core, at least core membership, those who attend, but yet one of these weeks meet inside of a webinar and, dig inside of a webinar and or access a webinar from the side of this meeting. I haven't nailed it all down yet, trying not to make it too complex, but at the same time, get ourselves on that platform so that we can learn from it and test it and see what the further capabilities of webinar are, what the limitations of webinar are, because they both exist. And, there's definitely benefits from webinar. And one of them being simplicity. It really is. As a host and account owner, it's a lot easier to run a webinar, I think, than it is a meeting when you have 1,000 cameras and mics to manage versus just the number of panelists that you have inside the webinar.
The pricing between webinar and Zoom events at the entry level is quite comparative. What do you think, if somebody were coming in at that level, why wouldn't they just go straight for Zoom events? Why would you, if you were coming in at is it 500 users or something?
Yeah, I think it's 500 out of the box, right? And now meetings is the same. Like the initial alignment of Zoom events licenses purchased lined up with, if you didn't own webinar, that's okay. We'll spin up that many webinars for you and support that many attendees in those webinars. But it was separate from what you owned. If you made a meeting, one of your Zoom events actually linked to a meeting, that would be tied to your meeting licensing that you owned prior to ever tying in. That's not the case any longer, right? The alignment is with both. If you have a 500 event license, it's 500 good for meetings or 500 good for webinars. And I think that was necessary, and I'm glad they did it as soon as they did, quite honestly, because that lends itself to my response to your question, Rupert, is why wouldn't you Just start.
Okay.
And is that essentially Zoom's goal is to just have everybody buy a Zoom events license, knowing that they can do a full-on event and or just a meeting or just a webinar or a mix of both and so forth. But now that, I mean, you still have to have the standalone products though too, because no one in their right mind would want to configure a, part of an event for a single meeting, but at the same time the
Yeah.
capability
Yeah, I think meetings would always be meetings, but whether or not
yeah.
webinar becomes events, or webinar
Yeah.
becomes maybe webinar would become a type within events. You've got summit and whatever the other conference and.
Well, yeah, like when you're creating it, is there more than one? And no, and they just let you schedule a webinar versus there's more than one. There's 3 back to back, and then you're starting to build a small event,
Because you also, I'm still wondering in the back of my mind what's going to happen to on Zoom.
Yeah.
If that gets rolled into, I don't know. I wonder whether that's going to get rolled into Zoom events.
I doubt it. I doubt it because it has so much social presence on one end of it, that they have a whole platform out there for it, and they do not market, right? They don't market Zoom events, as a product, yes, but not as our events, right? They don't socialize our events. But yeah, it will be interesting to see. And I kind of wonder what are the numbers, I mean, it's been out there for almost, well, for sure a year and a half, probably almost 2. And I wonder what its success, has been, or its adoption.
Yeah, there's new things coming up on it all the time, and it's still in beta, so it's got to go somewhere.
Beta, which is weird.
But when it comes
I
to
think maybe
Zoom
they've just used it as their own testing platform, to build Zoom events.
Yeah. But when it comes to Zoom events, we have talked to all of our clients that use webinars, and they are wary about moving over to Zoom events. I don't know if it's just a question of something new, something they don't know, but I think there's some time before people actually get convinced that this is the way to go.
But do they have a need to move? I mean, Zoom events serves the needs that some people have. If those folks, maybe your people in these cases, don't have a need that requires them to come out of Zoom webinar.
Well, the seminars are the first things that we would like to do, and that they're really good because seminars are effectively multiple webinars that people have to log into separately, and now they can just go in once, correct? And get all of the benefits of being able to choose what they want to attend within the lobby, etc., etc.
If Zoom events had a migration platform where you could like adopt your previous scheduled webinars, or if you've got and inherit your meeting IDs, and if you could like seamlessly bring some of those people over, maybe.
I don't know. I my feeling is that if they don't touch it, they won't take it. Yeah, they need to have the experience, and there are not enough people who have actually attended a Zoom event to be able to say, okay, let's do it. I saw it, I went, it's really cool, let's do it.
Well, on that point, there's a Zoom event next week. The Zoom Work Transformation Summit. So if you have stakeholders out there and you want to get them exposed to Zoom events at a hopefully, well, it's a big scale, and there's some big players talking there. So
yeah, I was going to say they're all top brass speakers that are all lined up. Yeah. So, well, good stuff. See, like I was going to add one more thing. I don't remember what it was. Anyways, it's getting late for Robert and Kirsten, especially. Hello, Kirsten. You've been so quiet today. Anyways, always a pleasure. If there isn't anything else you want to bring up, any tests that anybody want to run or hammer on while we've got 6 of us live in front of cameras and so forth?
I noticed something with my Stream Deck integration where I'm muting audio and video. When I hit the button on the Stream Deck, it'll mute or unmute right away on the Zoom program that's running. But it takes a few seconds delay for it to transition on the Stream Deck. It's probably more of a Stream Deck issue. Right?
Are you talking about the indication that it's now muted?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you using Companion or the Stream Deck app?
No, the Stream Deck plugin.
Yeah, I would say it is probably that plugin that's got the delay back to it for some reason. I don't know why, but I use Companion myself. But I'm usually muting vMix, not Zoom as well. But yeah, so
it's not the first report I've heard of that problem though. I haven't necessarily heard of a solution, but there's certainly you're not alone with that problem for sure.
Well, and if it, I'll also say, if it doesn't seem to always do that, I would say, then, like before I fired up everything, I reboot all 3 machines involved in today's, show, if you will, and I power them down and power everything back up, and just make sure it's a nice, clean, fresh start for resources. And I did update my NVIDIA Studio drivers today on 2 of the systems, and which I don't consider this live production, although it is a live. I just think it's a fun gathering where we get to learn. It's more classroom style versus a show. I hesitate to call it a show or a production, but I treat it like a production, and in the sense of rebooting all the equipment and making sure everything's clean, and closing all the extraneous programs and software and so forth. That I really even hate having Chrome open. I do have it open, especially when I'm looking at like release notes, and YouTube is up so I can monitor the stream and so forth. But I just haven't separated that onto a different computer yet. But
I find sometimes the hardest hit with Chrome is opening it. So if you if you need to have it open, I find it's kind of best to open it before you
let it settle in.
Exactly.
It's true.
Rather than trying to open it in the middle of a deal.
Well, and what's so wild about Chrome is you can, like Chrome. I have 4 tabs open in Chrome right now, but if I open my task manager and sort it correctly, Zoom is up. I'm surprised. Zoom is top of the list. I don't usually see that, but Zoom is top of the CPU list. vMix is second. Chrome is 3rd, but it's number 1 in memory usage. But I have 4 tabs open, but there's 14 different Chrome processes running on my system. Like, wow, we really just pummels the system. And Chrome's a killer. It's
system
popular,
and memory.
but it's a killer. Yeah. I'll say, maybe you can have your eyes out. How many of you are on the latest 5.9.1 already of Zoom? A couple, all right, yeah. I don't know. I don't know really whether it's coincidence or what, but when I upgraded and then I launched, for a few months now, I no longer have Zoom remember my login. And so when I launch Zoom, I have to sign in every time so that I know explicitly what account I'm signing in with. and so I logged in with this host account, and the window that's normally pretty close to square, right, as far as equal sides, was wider. And it looked like, like it had never done that before. And they now, kind of snapped it to a size that's more ready to host the lobby of Zoom events. That's what I felt. That's what where my mind went when I logged in and got there to the join or meetings or scheduling. The same screen, just it snapped itself larger than regularly sized. So I just got to keep your eyes out. It doesn't mean anything necessarily, but I don't know if it was something I had done previously and it remembered it, but I don't usually do that. So, or if they're preparing it to better host the lobby when somebody logs into a Zoom event, for instance, because that is the host window of the lobby, right? So,
yeah, I hadn't noticed anything, but I'll keep an eye out.
yeah. Well, very good. Anything from anybody else? Otherwise, we'll
Nothing from me.
Wrap up for the day. Wish everybody a great weekend. And if you have anything come up, write it in the Facebook group or give a shout out or email me. But always good to connect. So have a great evening and enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next week for sure.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great to be
Bye,
back.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye.